Write the introduction of your book last. Doesn't that sound funny? Today is day 90 of this 100-day journey. If you have been writing 500 words a day for the last 95 days, then you have at least 45,000 words in your draft, heading towards that goal of about 50,000 words. Now, honestly, I'm guessing you have a lot more words than that. You may have already surpassed that 50,000 word mark because when you sit down to write 500 words a day, you often write more. How are you doing with your draft writing? This week, we're talking about the extra sections of your book. These are the small sections of your book that aren't the main content of the book, but they are important. So, yesterday we talked about the author's bio. The day before that, we talked about the acknowledgments section. And today, we're going to talk about the introduction to your book. Once you have drafted your book, you actually know what it contains. Now, of course, some of those parts may still be really rough. Some sections may still just be bullet lists and may not be fully fleshed out, but you know everything that is going to be included in your book at this point. And it's really important to know what your book contains before you write the introduction to the book. The introduction is written from this viewpoint of knowing the whole of the book. That's why we recommend that you write the introduction last if your book needs one. Now, in reality, not every book needs an introduction. Many fiction books don't have an introduction at all. A lot of nonfiction books tend to, but not everyone does. Sometimes the introduction may be written by another person. If that's the case, you might start thinking at this point about who you might want to write that and how you are going to get them the draft to read so they can write that. But it's not time to do that yet. So the introduction is usually a few pages where you let the reader know why you wrote the book, give an overview of what they're going to find in the book, and maybe explain why this book is important. In fiction writing, it may be that the introduction is written from the viewpoint of a character after the events of the book. It may be that it gives some important backstory of the character. The important thing about the introduction is that it lets your reader know why this story needs to be told or why this book needs to be written. So sometimes that will include your personal story, your experience with struggling with an issue, and that's why you had to write this book. Confession, I think this is one of the hardest sections of the book to write. It's where I want to explain the purpose and the why of the book, but I also want to build anticipation for my reader about what they're going to find in the book. I'm also really aware that if I don't do a good job in the introduction, they might not ever read the book. And so I feel a lot of pressure. Yikes. So that's why I suggest that you start working on the introduction at this point before you fully finish your draft and move into the rest period away from your draft. Here's why. By starting the introduction right now, you get your ideas out on paper, and they're going to be really rough. You get to present the overview of the book as you see it now, but that still might change. You get to work on what it is that you want to say in your first contact with your reader, but you still have plenty of time to polish it. Again, if you wait to write the introduction until you're at the deadline at the end of your book, you're going to have to write it quickly and you may not craft it quite the way that you want it to. You know, I am a writer who needs what I call percolating time. Maybe your personal writing process is a little bit different, but for me, I like to get it out and then be able to step back and have some time to think about it. Is that really what I want to say? Because often the first thing out of my head is not my complete thought on the subject. And that's true of the introduction of your book, too. That it's probably going to be helpful to you to put it out there in a draft form, just like the rest of your book, and then have time to come back in and edit it with fresh eyes, fresh perspective, and maybe some nuanced thinking. You have time then to make it better. And that's why I encourage you to go ahead and write your introduction as you are finishing the last chapter of your book. Maybe you'll do it a little before, maybe you'll do it a little bit after, somewhere in there before you draw the line and say, this book is finished. Let's get a rough draft of the introduction as well. That gives you the opportunity for your introduction to just be a draft at this point, too. You have time to make it better. You have time to craft the words. You have time to really understand why you've written this book and why your readers need to read this book. And you know, this may be one of those sections of your book that for now it's just bullet points and it's not fully fleshed out. That's okay. At least the ideas are out there and you can come back and refine them. So I hope I've convinced you to go ahead and draft the introduction as you're finishing your book. You might be interested in watching this video on the author's bio. And if you haven't yet, please take a second to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.